Jacob.
Hello.
Okay, so I want to know what you're doing in political theory right now.
Well, I, I wouldn't say I'm doing anything sort of proactive or constructive. I just studied it during my time in college. They sort of asked us to choose a specialty among the political science topics, and theory was the one that was the most interesting to me. So I spent a little more time studying that one relative to the others.
It almost sounds like you didn't even know you were going to be getting into political theory until you were already a political science major.
Yeah, that's definitely accurate. When I was a starting out political science major, I thought I would be going to law school, sort of immediately after college. That was kind of the path I was on, and I wouldn't really say I was an expert in politics, and I wouldn't say that now, but political science was just kind of a natural home for pre-law students. In terms of, it's one of the most, it might even be the most common major that law school students pick. And so I thought I would be like everybody else and choose that one. So I didn't fully know what it would be like, and so that's why I kind of developed my specific preference for politics and theory as I was already in there.
When you say that you developed a preference for politics and theory, it's specifically political theory, it almost sounds like you're saying you're trying to find your own unique space within the political science field.
I don't know about unique space. I mean, political theory is certainly something that people have been working on for, I mean, maybe thousands of years, right, since before Plato. And so I don't know if it's unique in that sense, but I do feel like one of the reasons why I wanted to focus more theoretically is because I disliked kind of the nature of political conversation in the modern American hemisphere. And I was kind of frustrated with how heated and sort of non-productive conversation seemed to be, so I wanted to sort of zoom out and focus on theory.
Well, in that case, did you find support in those views that you were finding, or that that you were developing, or those observations? Were you able to, like, how are you able to? Because I'm sure you're not the only one that feels that way. At the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean it's easy to find support.
I mean, when you're dealing with theory, it's one of the reasons why it's sort of easier to have conversations about it is because it involves generally less specific and contemporary issues. So people don't really, you know, if you have a difference about the amount of power you think the government should have, as an example, people aren't necessarily going to get too up in arms about it, right? Now, if you have a difference in like the transgender issue or the Second Amendment, something like this, people might be a lot more inclined to have a really heated perspective, either in agreement or in support of yours. Whereas when you compare it to really theoretical issues, that's less so the case. So I wouldn't say there's too much opposition for the kinds of things I would believe in or study.
So in that case, are you saying that political theory is a bit more foundational,
Yeah, absolutely.
as opposed to?
As opposed to if you're in American politics, anything contemporary, it's very focused on the present, right, and what changes that you want to see happen immediately and why you think that they should happen, and they're usually based on reactions to current events, right, and that's something you've seen with the Second Amendment conversation, right? That's an example I brought up, and the same with the transgender issue. It's as events are occurring and becoming more common, people are talking about them more, and then taking stances on the issue.
So getting back to political theory, how does a political theorist address such a situation?
Well,
I mean, let me say it this way: what can you offer?
what can I myself offer?
You or the field?
Yeah. So I guess one way is to sort of think about things in the past, if they've been an issue, if maybe it's a symptom of the modern era, or maybe it's actually secretly a very old and common problem we've been invested in. Transgenderism. I guess I'll keep using these examples. Transgenderism in specific might technically be a new issue, but it's kind of a flavor of a past issue. There's a lot of testimony to suggest that that's kind of a thing that's always existed, especially if you look to like the Roman Empire or something. As for the Second Amendment, this is kind of a much newer debate when you're thinking about the last, gosh, I don't even want to say, I want to say less than 100 years, there hasn't been much pushback over the Second Amendment at all. So this is kind of a much newer issue, and a lot of the reasons it's come about is just due to safety concerns, right? We've seen lots of mass shootings happen. Some people diagnose the problem with these issues as related to mental health rather than related to guns itself. I don't have too strong of an opinion on the Second Amendment, so I'm not going to comment specifically on that, but sort of thinking about the issue and reasons for why our government is structured and how it could be structured. When you think about the sort of the background and the backdrop for these issues, you're going to think about, okay, why do these things exist? What does it mean that they exist, rather than looking at the effects of why they do exist?
You know, speaking of effects, Jacob, that's something that is a big with voters, I would say. Voters are looking for oftentimes very specific changes and what they experience even day to day. So there is a big difference between results and effects and just understanding what's going on and understanding causes. And that's something that I had wanted to get into a little bit more, because I'm just wondering, you know, when it comes to say American politics, where do we find, or are there sort of places we can go to if we want to know more about why do we stress results and effects compared to why would we be more interested in causes and understandings? Who is sort of associated with those various ways of approaching the issues that we have?
Well, I would say, as far as, like, you mentioned reasons why people might choose one over the other, I'm not going to tell somebody else which sort of approach thinking is right or wrong. If you're somebody that's extremely focused on effects and consequences of decisions, that's, go for it and think about politics in that way. And if you feel the opposite, the same deal, as I usually tend to. As far as where to go, most you would say ongoing political discussion is sort of based around what's happening in the present and new emerging issues. You see this with pundits, especially to a lesser extent. You see this with sitting representatives, right? They tend to be also focusing on issues, but they'll talk about theory too. So I would say it's quite easy to find places that are talking about what's going on in the present and the effects of those issues. As far as zooming out, it usually means looking at what authors or theorists have said in the past. It could also be looking at more academic papers in academia settings. But I would say a lot of what I did as a political science major was just to look through and read older text and kind of think about what they meant.
I think that sounds like a path.
Yep.
It's a path to put yourself on if you're interested in maybe understanding both sides, or even if you're interested in more specific issues, and then also having a chance to get down to more foundational issues.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let me just get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
So there's two things. Did you know that Nebraska has a unicameral system? So that means that instead of having a Senate and a separate House of Representatives, they have one I believe is called chamber, mm-hmm. and that's where they pass their laws and every such thing. So it's called a unicameral system, and that was enacted in Nebraska, say the turn of the 21st century.
Huh. Yeah, no, I didn't know that. Couldn't say that I did. Yeah.
Okay, what do you think about that? A unicameral system?
Well, so we have about what? If it's the turn of the century, we have about 26 years of data to see if it's been working for them. I mean, this is one of the things about our government. We have a federalist system that emphasizes states' rights. Now, that's sort of been diminished over time, but the bones of that structure are still in place today. And I would say we still have a more prevalent state-based government in America than is true for most countries in the world. So it gives Nebraska the freedom to sort of experiment with different political structures like that. If that's been working for them, that's great. I can't say I have too strong of a gut reaction one way or the other, but it would be like if Nebraska came back and said, hey, we've been loving our unicameral legislator, then it's something that more states should try.
Okay, so that's okay. I thought that was very interesting, and surprising actually, because I was under the impression that all 50 states in the union have a bicameral legislative system.
Yeah, I mean it would be most common considering it's modeled after the federal level.
Modeled after the federal level, meaning
The federal government, we have the House and we have the Senate. We even have the executive and the judiciary, but they're sort of not considered part of the bicameral part of the legislature. So.
Okay, that's something to look more into. Okay, and then another fun question. Would you share some of your favorite facts about party history? And let me give you an example, because it's the one that stands out for me the most. That would be President Lincoln as the first president of the Republican Party in 1861.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did know that about Lincoln. I actually sort of enjoy looking at the history of pre-Democratic and Republican parties because it honestly didn't exist for that long in our history. And we still have the same parties at the time of Lincoln. The Democrats were still the other party, so they're a little bit older than the Republican Party. The Republican Party actually is kind of the formation of loose, fringe, and arguably fractured political groups at the time. The Free Soil movement, the remainder of the Whig Party. Did they go to the Democrats? I'm not too sure, but I know that it was a conglomeration of fringe.
Are you saying that while the Democratic Party was a bit more established, the Republican Party was kind of like a mix of whoever was ready to join at the time?
Yeah, basically, yeah. So I think looking at the sort of pre-Democrat and Republican parties are interesting. There was a time when the Federalist Party, which means the opposite of what we think of it today, was sort of the foundational thing that people were fighting for. It's like when the country was new, the biggest debate was how much power do you give the federal government relative to the states. Not a lot of people know this, but George Washington was actually in the minority, our first president, when he thought that the federal government should have more power. But generally, the founders and the other politicians at the time believed that the state should be having more power.
The state power reminds me of just regions, as opposed to one nation. States remind me of upholding a sense of region and cultural differences. That sounds kind of obvious today, but say during the early stages of the country becoming a country and becoming a union, can you talk a little bit about that? About how was this modeled? How was understanding that we have a federal government and then we also have states? Where did that come from?
Well, it came from, I guess, the fallout of the American Revolution. So, American Revolution was like a war of attrition, which means that it wasn't the English sending its whole army because they thought that they could get the rebellion under control quite easily. Once the Americans had lasted long enough, the English gave up, and the Americans were its own colony, its own nation of colonies, and they had to kind of decide how they were going to run themselves. And for a while, I think it took them 2 years to pass the Articles of what is it called? There's the initial government of the. Do you mind if I look it up? I forget the name.
No, not at all. And we're talking about the colonies.
Yeah. Well, it's actually before. I mean, yeah, it was with the colonies, but it's before original U.S.
So this is before the American Revolution.
Well, no. It's after the revolution was won.
After the revolution was won.
Yeah.
Won.
Yeah, it was governed under the name is eluding me, but it's a different set of rules than the federal government that we have today. And Articles of Confederation, right. So the Articles of Confederation were like a sort of a loose system of government that gave the states a lot of rights, and the federal government had very little power.
So let me jump in. So what you're sort of bringing back to light is the new colonists understood that they wanted to minimize absolute power right from the beginning.
Yeah, they of course, like the whole country was molded after rebelling against that absolute power, right? And so in response, they had this kind of very weak and loose federal government. But after about 6 years, it wasn't really working. There's the famous Shays Rebellion, which is like just a small rebellion over a liquor tax, but the federal government had no established army, so it couldn't even put down the rebellion by itself. And so it was just kind of an embarrassment and a disaster. And once this and a couple of other factors had formed, the founders kind of reconvened for a constitutional convention and drafted the constitution we still have today. So.
How do you think or what do you know about their insistence on making America succeed as a nation?
Well, I guess the easiest way to say it is it was just grassroots. It was, by the time of the revolution, everybody there had grown up in America. I mean, maybe some people had moved from England, but America had been its own thing for a long time. So they'd all independently liked their country, and they wanted it to succeed. So they really tried and put their heads forward to make a best system that they thought of. There were a lot of people working towards it, a lot of debate, and that's how we got the Constitution.
So would you agree that the founding fathers essentially understood that what their mission and what their job was, which was to have to prosper and defend their belief in this life, or this union that is representing freedom and freedom from oppression and freedom from, for example, we mentioned taxes, like freedom from unfair taxes, for example, and other injustices. So, but largely we're dealing around freedom. So, would you say that that's just kind of what the motivation was?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Freedom.
Yeah. Ultimately, it was freedom. I mean, freedom is a important idea to us, and it wasn't such a sort of a common idea at the time. I mean, when the Declaration of Independence says we hold these truths to be self-evident, right, that all men are created equal, it's kind of a very revolutionary take. It's sort of not something that somebody would hear and say, well, duh. It was they were pretty bold about saying, no, I think we all have these rights, and we're going to structure our country around that.
Okay. All right. I think it's something that Americans should remember, that a lot of I guess you could say labor and war and a lot has gone into establishing our country, and I think it's something that Americans, I believe it's something that Americans can never really lose sight of, as long as there's going to be belief in what is possible in terms of freedom and liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.